Chapter 561. Snatching the Blade. The instant Su Ming clasped his hands together and stopped the bone blade, a large amount of freezing air immediately spread out from within it, flowing into his body through his hands. The cold froze him for a moment. However, his eyes remained clear, and there was even a hint of ferociousness within them. Blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth. This was the first time his blood was spilled when he was Destiny. A blade that swore loyalty to a wrong owner is not worthy of killing me. Su Ming roared, and his sinking body came to a halt as he lifted his head and glared at the bone blade. I, Su Ming, am your master. From now on, you belong to me. Right when he said these words, his hands turned pitch black, as the freezing air spread out, and his hair started floating. His nascent divinity shot out of his body and turned into a gigantic shadow behind him before charging towards the bone blade. The instant he touched it, he felt a strong force repelling him. Yet since Su Ming had continuously cut down the blade's power previously, even though the force repelling him was strong, it was frozen in its place and unable to escape. This allowed the nascent divinity to crawl inside in a frenzy. If it was a normal will trying to take over this blade forcefully with nascent divinity, perhaps it would not be able to do so, but the strongest aspect of Su Ming was never his power of cultivation or his combat powers, but the will that was formed after going through endless cycles of reincarnations in the Candle Dragon's undying and imperishable world. The strength of his will far surpassed his power of cultivation, and even those who had attained great completion in the Berserker soul realm might not be able to compare to it. The strength of his will might not possess too much practical combat power and was like empty air, possessing a superficial feeling, but once he fused it with his nascent divinity, even though the power that would erupt forth might not be anything close to any sort of combat power, but it could let Su Ming be completely unrivaled in his attempts to possess anything. Moreover, unless there was someone else who had an equally strong will as his, then if he went on to possess someone else, he would not find a single person who could stand up against him. Possession had its similarities to forcefully branding an enchanted vessel. That was why Su Ming had chosen to weaken the blade first, because all of his actions had been for this moment, to forcefully claim this bone blade as his own. As Su Ming's nascent divinity rammed in, the bone blade started resisting violently, but in an instant, a piercing sound came from within the blade. A huge force spread out from Incidate was trying to struggle free of Su Ming's hands. Nothing I've set my eyes upon can run away. Su Ming's expression turned dark. He clasped his hands firmly on the blade and did not let go. Once his nascent divinity rushed into the bone blade with an extreme speed, he started suppressing all forms of thought, trying to resist him like a hot blade cutting through butter. When Sai Ma Xin saw this scene from the distance, a look of shock filled with disbelief appeared on his face. Su Ming's actions had once again stunned him. He did not think he would be so determined to snatch that bone blade from him. You're biting off more than you can chew. This blade was born from the god of Berserker's left hand. It has already gained sentience a long time ago. Even if I am the god of Berserker's scion, I can only borrow its power. Even I can't control it, and you're thinking about snatching it away. You're mad. Once Sai Ma Xin suppressed his shock, a cold sneer curled up his lips. He did not believe that Su Ming would succeed. To him, this action was simply too crazy. Yet even though he did not believe Su Ming would succeed, this was a chance for him, because right then, his opponent was focused solely on snatching the bone blade. He did not hesitate. The moment he said those words, Sai Ma Xin, who had now mostly recovered, charged towards Su Ming. He closed in within an instant and lifted his right hand to strike his forehead. Killing intent shone in his eyes, and that strike also contained the irreconcilable hate he harbored towards Su Ming. The instant his palm arrived, a glint abruptly appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He let his left hand fall from the bone blade and seized it with his right, not caring about blood flowing down. Once he made sure the bone blade would not be able to escape, he swung his left hand towards Sai Ma Xin the instant he approached him. The power to reverse time arrived once again, and its appearance made Sai Ma Xin's face instantly turn pale. Once again, he miscalculated. He originally thought that Su Ming would be paying full attention to snatching the bone blade and did not expect that he would still be able to cast that terrifying divine ability. He had made many miscalculations and experienced many setbacks as he fought against Su Ming, and all of these things struck a severe blow towards Sai Ma Xin's confidence. In fact, He had a feeling that no matter how many serendipities he received, he would still be unable to fight against the speed before his eyes, that he was bound to fail. Only a small hint of that feeling could be detected within him in the beginning, but as time continued passing by, it filled his whole heart, especially when he was dragged into the cycles of repetition once again. The instant Xianxia Xin's body was filled with the power of the past and he started moving backwards instead of forward, Su Ming clenched his left hand into a fist and slammed it against his opponent's body. When his body collapsed and he coughed up blood, Su Ming waved his left hand again. The process repeated itself. The span of time Su Ming could remain as destiny this time had clearly become much longer. This was related to the serendipity he received from Blood Absconsion tribe and connected to the increase in his level of cultivation. Su Ming might look as if he was occasionally in a disadvantage during this battle, but in truth, since the both of them truly attacked each other, he could be said to have been completely leading the course of the battle. He had completely suppressed Xianxia Xin with his power. It was especially so during this moment. Su Ming had his right hand around the bone blade as his nascent divinity continued fusing into it and suppressing all forms of resistance to forcefully leave his brand on it, while his left hand executed the art to return to the past, causing Xianxia Xin to sink into depression. Xianxia Xin's eyes turned red. He could not accept this. He absolutely could not accept this. He had received the second god of Berserker's inheritance. This was an incredibly rare serendipity in the entire land of the Berserkers. This was a fortuitous chance that would make an endless stream of people go mad with jealousy. But he was still suppressed by Su Ming. He did not possess a single ounce of strength within him capable of fighting against this state where he was caught in the cycle of repetitions, even when Su Ming was still holding onto the bone blade with his right hand. This made Xianxia Xin roar in his heart, unable to accept his fate. But he could not even give voice to his roars. As rumbling sounds reverberated in the air, Xianxia Xin's body shattered again and again, and his recovery began to slow down with each passing moment. If this continued, then before long, he would completely die. However, Su Ming gasped in his heart. Xianxia Xin could be said to be the hardest person to kill ever since his power grew exponentially. All of this was because of that great art of heartless berserker seed he practiced. If Xianxia Xin did not have this art, Su Ming would have killed him a long time ago. Even if he had received the second god of Berserker's inheritance, Xianxia Xin would still not be Su Ming's opponent. But Xianxia Xin's life force remained as an unending stream within him, and Su Ming's time as destiny was limited. Even though his time limit had increased by quite a huge margin due to the increase to his power of cultivation, his time as destiny had to end now. Su Ming's hair was returning to its original state swiftly, and his body was gradually changing. The power of the past was also rapidly becoming weaker. Xianxia Xin immediately noticed this. As he slowly began to recover from his collapsed state, a murderous glare appeared in his eyes, and he finally obtained the chance to speak. "Can't go on anymore, Su Ming. Can't go on anymore." Xianxia Xin laughed maniacally. There was a wound on him that had pierced through his chest, and it was quickly recovering at the moment. When he saw that Su Ming's divine ability was weakening, he laughed loudly as a ferociousness expression appeared on his face. "You're noisy," Su Ming said coldly. The instant his appearance returned to normal, his hair turned black, and he reverted from being destiny. Xianxia Xin's laughter resounded in the air, and his body was no longer bound by the power of returning to the past. Right at the moment he could finally swiftly retreat, a piercing buzz rang forth from the bone blade in Su Ming's right hand. That buzzing sounded like a cry of submission, like a final, unwilling roar once everything within the blade had been suppressed. At the same moment that sound echoed in the air, Su Ming released the hold of his right hand. The bone blade immediately turned around, causing the blade's hilt to fall in Su Ming's palm. Once he held it in his hand, the power of all the berserker bones in his body started circulating within him. During that instant, a shocking, black murderous aura erupted from the bone blade in his hand. It might be unwilling and might have subjected itself in humiliation, but at that moment, it could be controlled by Su Ming. Because once Su Ming's nascent divinity fused with his incredible will, he had forcefully subjugated the bone blade, even though it had been born within the god of Berserker's left hand, and even though it had existed for millions of years. The instant Su Ming held that blade, he took a step towards the retreating Xianxia Xin. That man was originally laughing loudly, but his expression was rapidly changing to that of shock. Like a long arc, Su Ming charged towards him with the bone blade in hand and cut down with it. Before the blade even cut Sima Xin's body, a piercing sound that sliced through the air as if it had cut through space itself resounded, and a black ray of light traveling in an arc flashed in the air. During that instant, Su Ming's bone blade had already arrived at the top of Sima Xin's head and cut through his skull, his body, right until it cut him in half. A rumbling sound so loud it shook the sky and earth rang out. Sima Xin let out a shrill scream of pain once the blade cut him completely apart. Su Ming lifted his head. With the black bone blade in hand, his black hair dancing behind his head, the profound, strange light in his eyes, and the aloof expression on his face, he was filled with an indescribably enigmatic and mysterious air. The left half of the two sides of Sima Xin's body turned into a layer of darkness once he was cut in half, eventually turning into black liquid that fell into the sea beneath them. However, the remaining half of his body fell into the sea as he continued falling backwards while remaining a bloody mess. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes and he charged straight into the sea with the bone blade in hand. However, right when he came closer to the surface of the sea, a sense of danger rose within him. Without hesitation, he disappeared in the span of a breath, and when he reappeared 1,000 feet away, he immediately saw the spot where he had previously been collapsing with a bang and turning into a vortex. The appearance of that vortex caused a whirlpool to appear at the surface of the sea. At the center of it was the god of Berserker's left hand, which had already been submerged by the sea. Chapter 562, Welcoming of Deities. Su Ming, I will not be able to reconcile with myself if we do not end our grudge today. With my identity as a berserker, I will burn my blood and revert my body to that of the second god of berserkers. Sima Xin's looming voice traveled out of the whirlpool in the sea. As the waves roared, his voice spread in all reactions, and Su Ming frowned. The difficulty in killing Sima Xin was something he had rarely seen in his life. Even now, this person had not died, and this made Su Ming gain a deeper understanding towards that great art of heartless berserker seed. He suddenly came to understand why the immortals deployed so many powerful warriors just to kill the second god of berserkers, and even tore his body into pieces even though he only had half the first god of berserkers' power. All of this must surely have been because the second god of berserkers was even more difficult to deal with and kill compared to the current Sima Xin. No matter who it was, they would surely frown when they came face to face against this sort of enemy. Su Ming had already mortally wounded Sima Xin numerous times, and if he looked at it based on the number of times the man had recovered, then Su Ming could say that he had killed Sima Xin a countless number of times. But even now, the man still remained alive. The presence he exuded from the whirlpool in the sea was also slightly stronger than before. As his voice echoed and the roars from the sea reverberated in the air, the second god of berserkers' left hand shuddered, and the spot where the bone blade had been pulled out from its palm started shining with a powerful light. Sima Xin's body appeared within it. He still looked as he did previously, as if his body had never been torn apart. However, he did look even more dried up than before. He was now really just skin and bones. His eyes were crimson red, and his face was filled with murderousness. He did not stand up, but had his hands pressed on the god of berserker's palm instead. He lifted his head to glare at Su Ming. His body was vague and indistinct in the powerful light. At the instant he looked over, a strange voice tumbled out of his mouth. Hear my chant for the breaking of souls within one incense stick. Let my blood be set ablaze. Sima Xin lifted his head and roared. Then, as if fire had been kindled within his body, a wave of heat abruptly spread through the area. At the same time, Sima Xin's face started changing quickly. The god of berserker's arm beneath him started withering away rapidly, as if it had been sucked away. A roar filled with madness slowly traveled into mid-air. That roar did not belong to Sima Xin, neither did it belong to Su Ming. It appeared out of nowhere, as if it had originally existed in the world, but only a certain set of people could hear it during certain moments. This was the second god of berserker's roar, filled with his grudge towards the immortals, and his unwillingness to accept death. The instant that roar filled the area, Sima Xin also lifted his head and roared. It practically fused together with the second god of berserker's roar to turn into a frequency, causing the people who heard it to be unable to differentiate the voices. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. When he narrowed his eyes, he took a step forward and appeared beside the god of Berserker's left hand in an instant. At the moment his bone blade drew an arc in the air, it swung down towards Sima Xin. While he moved, Sima Xin's body swiftly swelled up and his hair grew much longer. His flesh started squirming in his body, and he became much sturdier than before. As his body transformed, he grew to become 30 feet tall. At that moment, he was no longer Sima Xin. He had instead changed into another person. A power filled with madness erupted from his body, and at the same time he stomped the god of Berserker's left arm with his right foot and flew up to throw a fist towards Su Ming's incoming bone blade. Perhaps it was no longer accurate to say that the punch belonged to Sima Xin, because his mind had become muddled at that point. Setting his own blood ablaze to forcefully receive the full inheritance and executing the power within the inheritance was not something he could control at the moment. The damage dealt to him as he forcefully executed that ability was something that he could only heal using his life. The life spoken of was his own vitality. He had used his life as a sacrifice, used all the life force within his berserker seeds in exchange for this, and all of it was for the sake of killing Su Ming. Sima Xin's fist reached an extreme speed as he hurled it in a punch forward. In fact, his afterimage was still left on the god of Berserker's hand when his true body had already appeared before Su Ming. Su Ming's pupils shrank due to that punch. He just felt an indefinable pressure coming swiftly at him from the front. His robes fluttered backwards and all his hair stood up on his body. A strong sense of danger swiftly rose within him. He did not have time to think. He lifted the bone blade in his hands and slashed down at the air before him. A shocking boom surged into the sky at that instant. As it reverberated in the air, the entire area shook. Su Ming, however, only felt a huge rebound coming from the direction before him. It shot up the bone blade and traveled into his arm before going through his entire body. As that rebound shot through him, Su Ming gained the feeling as if 100,000 mountains had fallen on him. He coughed out a huge mouthful of blood and staggered several thousands of feet backwards. A grave expression appeared on his face as he looked towards the spot where he was a moment ago. Sima Xin's body materialized from the void. His entire right arm exploded in that instant, torn into a bloody mess, but it was strangely recovering at a swift pace. His face was emotionless, and his eyes were lifeless, but there was a powerful presence coming from his body. This was the god of Berserker's blazing blood art. It was a mysterious art within his inheritance that could allow the caster's combat powers to instantly escalate. This art was astonishingly similar to Su Ming's destiny. When the second god of Berserkers cast this divine ability in the past, he managed to make all the Berserkers bow down and worship him, had managed to shock the immortals with it, and had left a memory of the second god of Berserkers carved into the immortals' bones even after the first had left. It was also the source for his death. At that moment, Sima Xin's lifeless and apathetic eyes looked towards Su Ming. Not a hint of emotion could be seen within him as he lifted his right foot and walked towards him. At the instant his foot landed, the world rumbled. Su Ming immediately vanished, continuing to retreat. The moment he disappeared, the air in the spot where he was previously immediately shattered to turn into a gigantic black vortex. It swept in all directions, and Sima Xin walked out of the vortex to look towards Su Ming, who had appeared in the distance. Su Ming's expression had turned incredibly sour. The change of Sima Xin had increased his combat powers explosively. In Su Ming's eyes, that punch he delivered just now could completely suppress a berserker who had attained great completion in the berserker soul realm by force. If Su Ming could still turn into destiny, then he would be able to fight against him, but he had just ended his transformation as destiny, and he would not be able to turn again within such a short period of time. Because of that, fighting against this Sima Xin who had just received an increase in strength became a slight headache. When Sima Xin looked towards him with the expressionless face which made him look as if he had no soul, then lifted his right foot to come closer, Su Ming's pupils shrank. The entire area within this region had turned into chaos as the second god of Berserker's faint and indistinct roars rang in the air, giving voice to his unwillingness to accept his fate throughout the ages. The seawater beneath them roared, and the ice above them continued shattering, as if it wanted to completely submerge this place in water. During this critical moment, a thought appeared in Su Ming's heart. Right when Sima Xin's foot landed and he closed in once again with a boom in the sky, Su Ming lifted his right hand swiftly and patted his storage bag. Immediately, a round medicinal pill appeared on his palm. That pill was the welcoming of deities. It could absorb all the soul fragments in the world. If anyone swallowed it, they would be able to turn into that soul itself. Its might could not be predicted, because it was largely connected to the soul the pill took in. Receive the spirits from all directions, absorb the remaining wills in all universes. If the souls are empty, then they all can be taken. With 2 fingers pinching the welcoming of deities, Su Ming quickly mumbled under his breath, a strange light in his eyes. The instant he said those words, a piercing dark light immediately erupted from the welcoming of deities in his hand. That dark light looked as if it came from a dark-colored sun, causing the entire area to be illuminated by it in an instant. During that moment, the entire ice above them, the sea water below them, and the surging sea was completely illuminated in that dark light. As it filled the area, Sima Xin's body swiftly appeared hundreds of feet away from Su Ming, looking as if he had been forced out by the dark light. Almost the moment his body appeared, the second god of Berserker's roar instantly reached an extreme volume within this world of ice in the sea. Roar! It reverberated in the air, and became clearer with each passing moment. In the span of a breath, the roars sounded as if they came from right next to Su Ming's ears. As they echoed in the area, black shadow threads appeared out of thin air from all over the place. Instantly, they all rushed towards Su Ming's welcoming of deities. The god of Berserker's left hand standing erect in the whirlpool in the sea underneath shuddered violently. This was the first time it shook because of someone else other than Sima Xin. Sima Xin had been able to receive the second god of Berserker's inheritance entirely because he practiced his cultivation methods and because of this arm. No one else would be able to obtain this sort of chance and serendipity. Even those before Sima Xin who had managed to find the arm were not able to receive the inheritance. That was why it was impossible for Su Ming himself to receive this inheritance, especially since Sima Xin's brand had been left in the second god of Berserker's left hand. It would be impossible for him to try and receive the inheritance in this sort of situation even if he tried to use the black stone fragment and changed his presence to deceive it. However, the appearance of the welcoming of deities had changed everything completely. This pill could absorb all soul fragments in the world, and the second god of Berserker's soul was included among these fragmented souls. If the second god of Berserker's soul did not exist to this day, then the legend of a certain set of people being able to sense his presence during certain periods of time would not have come to be. And clearly, the largest amount of the second god of Berserker's fragmented parts of the soul could be found on his arm. If Su Ming activated the welcoming of deities in this place, then he would definitely be absorbing the second god of Berserker's soul. As the god of Berserker's left arm trembled, a large amount of black smoke immediately erupted from within, turning into an illusory fog that rushed towards Su Ming's welcoming of deities. In an instant, that fog fused into the pill, causing it to tremble violently, and its color changed abruptly. A prime Val presence spread out from inside, and as if the pill had turned into a gigantic vortex, it started absorbing all the soul fragments within the place. Chapter 563, A Different Inheritance. All of this might seem to have happened slowly, but in truth, several breaths had only passed since Su Ming brought out the welcoming of deities to the moment it absorbed the soul fragments in the area. Right before his eyes, fog surrounded the pill, and a large amount of black smoke was still surrounding it, causing his right hand to be enveloped within. The roars from the second god of Berserkers did not sound as if they came from the surroundings, but were now coming from the welcoming of deities. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and without any hesitation, he swallowed the pill. The instant he did so, Sima Xin closed in once again after he was forced to reveal himself. He appeared before Su Ming, and with an apathetic and expressionless face, he hurled his fist straight towards him. Rumbling sounds echoed in the air. Su Ming retreated 7 steps, and when he withdrew, Sima Xin followed him, then clenched his fist and struck again. When Su Ming took his first step backwards, dark light started flickering in his eyes. When he took his second step, he calmed down, and strangely, his hair grew longer. At the instant he took his third step, the dark light appeared in Su Ming's eyes. That flickering light was a peculiar sight to behold. When he took his 5th, 6th, and 7th steps, his body became slightly thinner. The dark light in his eyes became stronger, and his hair grew to reach his feet. Right when he took his 7th step, a power that did not belong to him erupted from his body. When that power erupted, Xianxia caught up. Su Ming saw him delivering the same punch as before, straight towards his skull, and at that moment, a dark light flashed in his eyes. He opened his mouth and let out a roar so loud that it shook the sky and earth. Xianxia's incoming punch froze, and his flesh was immediately torn apart. Even his body started shattering inch by inch as if a violent gust of wind had swept past him, and at the same time, he started retreating abruptly. When he did so, his apathetic face changed instantly. His eyes went wide, and shocked disbelief appeared on his face once again. His breathing quickened, his body shuddered, and his disbelief caused him to be overwhelmed by an indefinable shock towards Su Ming. God of Berserker's Roar. This is the God of Berserker's Roar. This is impossible. This shouldn't be possible. Shock was evident in Xianxia's voice. That attack just then was indeed the God of Berserker's Roar. Su Ming stood in midair and looked towards Xianxia, the dark light in his eyes shining. At that moment, his head was clear, but he was still a little rusty in controlling his body. It was as if there was another force besides him that was controlling his body and fighting according to his will. This power came from the welcoming of deities, or more accurately, the soul fragments in the world that the pill had absorbed. In fact, there was a strong feeling raging in Su Ming's heart. That feeling came from the God of Berserker's left hand in the sea, and it was a feeling of a blood bond so strong that it was thicker than water. It was as if this left hand belonged to him. In truth, he could even sense something calling out to him from the God of Berserker's left hand, as if he was connected to it. However, Su Ming knew that this feeling was not because of him. It came from the soul fragments within the welcoming of deities, which it had absorbed from the world. Su Ming. Xianxia. When they had their first battle in Freezing Sky Clan all those years ago, all the people watching had thought that their divine abilities were incredibly similar, and even their temperament was similar. Many people had remembered this feeling in their hearts. Right now, while there might be no one watching their final battle, but the skills and divine abilities both Su Ming and Xianxia revealed were still similar. If Xianxia had received the second God of Berserker's inheritance and used the power stored in the God of Berserker's arm to boost his combat powers to the max, as well as to let himself gain his current appearance, then the Su Ming now could also be said to have gained the second God of Berserker's inheritance. However, his method was different from the one used by Xianxia. He had absorbed the second God of Berserker's soul, had the soul enter his mind, and had that mind fill his whole body. Xianxia had inherited the God of Berserker's power, had that power enter his body, then had his body cause his mind to scatter. They had different inheritances, different manners of manifesting their inheritances, different methods to obtain those inheritances, but what was similar was the second God of Berserkers. Su Ming closed his eyes and spread out his will through his body to fuse with the power contained within the welcoming of deities. Once he did so, his eyes flew open, and he lifted his right foot to take a step forward. An illusion immediately appeared on the ice above them. A huge foot appeared with a bang within that illusion. This was what Xianxia had cast earlier, the God of Berserker's 7 steps. As Su Ming executed that art, Xianxia's body tumbled backwards. He lifted his right hand and hurled a punch towards the incoming gigantic foot from above. With a loud bang, the footprint collapsed and vanished. At the same time, Xianxia was forced back several hundreds of feet. When he lifted his head, madness appeared in his eyes. This is impossible. I'm the one who should be the second God of Berserker's scion. I'm the one who should be. In his madness, Xianxia lifted his hands swiftly and clasped them together above his head. Then with his index finger and thumb, he formed a round mark above his head. At the same moment, Su Ming's eyes sparkled. He lifted his hands as well and had 4 of his fingers connect above his head to form the exact same mark Xianxia had done. I know all the divine abilities you inherited, Su Ming declared languidly. Dark light shone in his eyes, and at that moment, he had let go of his control over his body, allowing the power of the welcoming of deities to control it to fight. God of Berserker's alteration towards the stars, sun, and moon. First alteration. Disaster of the stars. Xianxia shouted, and his hands parted swiftly from the top of his head before he swung his arms towards the sky. With it, a large amount of the ice above them immediately crumbled and shattered away to reveal an illusionary shadow above. The illusion was of a sky with numerous stars glittering in it. As they moved and shone, they grouped together to form a huge arm. It looked as if it stretched out of the sky and was swiftly descending on Su Ming. The same words tumbled out of Su Ming's mouth in whispers. With a swing of his arm, another piece of sky filled with stars appeared above them. However, this one was completely different from the one Xianxia had brought up. It was an unfamiliar sky to the people of South Morning. This was the night that belonged to Su Ming's memories, Dark Mountain's night sky. As the stars shone in the sky, they also formed an arm. Once the two arms made appeared, they crashed into each other with a bang. A power strong enough to cause the sky to crumble and the earth to shatter erupted swiftly at that instant. The skies filled with stars were torn apart, and the ice above them crumbled completely. A large amount of seawater charged in madly, causing the space within the ice to be filled rapidly the sea. By the looks of it, before long, this place would truly become a part of the seabed. Xianxia coughed up blood and took several steps back. Just as he wanted to go and absorb the power from the god of Berserker's left hand so that he could recover his vitality, he discovered, much to his shock, that he could no longer absorb any more power from it. It was as if there was a will contained within the god of Berserker's arm that stopped him from absorbing his inheritance. Xianxia, it's my turn to attack now, Su Ming stated calmly. As he stood in midair, he lifted his right hand and bent his body slightly, making it look as if he had taken the form of a crescent moon. Right as he did so, a string of words that made Xianxia sink into despair fell out of his mouth. God of Berserker's alteration towards the stars, sun, and moon, second alteration. Shift in the moon. Once those words were spoken, an intense dark light spread out from Su Ming's body. As it shone, his entire body turned into a crescent moon. Moonlight shone through the entire area, and wherever it went, the place would be filled with a cold and murderous air. Almost the instant he activated his divine ability, an illusion of a moon immediately appeared around Xianxia's body. That illusion covered his entire body, and a true life-threatening sense of death rose in his heart. With Xianxia's inheritance and his current level of cultivation, he could execute the disaster of the stars from the alteration towards the stars, sun, and moon. As for the other two styles that came later, he could not execute them. At that moment, when he saw Su Ming executing the strongest shift in the moon, he lifted his right hand and struck his chest viciously in despair. From that one strike, he coughed up a mouthful of blood. The berserker bones in his body were crushed, the foundation he built in the awakening realm collapsed, his thoughts as a berserker soul shattered, and all the cultivation bases in his body became a muddled mess. This sort of chaos would definitely kill him if he did not have any life force providing nourishment to him. However, Xianxia knew that if he did not do this, then he would definitely die. It would be better if he did something crazy instead. Before his death, he would drag Su Ming to hell with him. You're dying together with me. Blood trickled out of the corners of Xianxia's lips. A ferocious expression twisted his face. As he roared, he lifted his right hand and positioned himself in the exact same pose as Su Ming. God of Berserker's alteration towards the stars, sun, and moon, second alteration. Shift in the moon. As Xianxia roared, his body became the same as Su Ming's. He, too, turned into a crescent moon in the depths of the sea. If he did not cause his cultivation bases to fall into a muddled mess, did not cause them to completely shatter and explode, then he would have been unable to execute the second alteration from the alteration of the stars, sun, and moon. At that moment, he could no longer care about anything. With death as the consequence, he executed this art, and immediately, the illusion of a crescent moon also appeared around Su Ming. Moon slaughter. Moon slaughter. Two voices shouting the exact same words exploded from the world in the depths of the sea. At the instant they erupted forth, the dark shadows of the crescent moon around Su Ming and Xianxia shattered and crumbled at the same time. Booming sounds came from their bodies, which seemed to have fused together with the shadows. Su Ming coughed up a huge mouthful of blood straight from his heart. He was sent tumbling backwards until he reached 1,000 feet away, and when he coughed up blood once again, he lifted his head swiftly. Sima Xin's right arm exploded and his right leg shattered. His body was flung out and blood filled the water. The right arm and leg he lost did not recover as it did in the past, but was gone for real instead. I can't accept this. I can't accept this. Sima Xin cried out shrilly. He could feel his life force fading away, and at that moment, he was already heading straight towards death, but he could not accept this. This is not my fate. It absolutely isn't. Chapter 564. Sima's Death. Sima Xin's piercing howl echoed in the water. He stopped after tumbling several thousands of feet backwards. His left hand started rotting away, and as his left leg trembled, it began swiftly withering away. Signs of decay appeared on his body. Hair fell from his head, and a large amount of black spots appeared on his face. Those black spots rotted away one by one and let out a horrible stench. This was not due to the power of moon slaughter, but was due to Su Ming gathering up the power of the curse within him when he executed Shift in the Moon. You might know all my divine abilities, but you definitely won't know the last divine ability I will cast in my life. Sima Xin's eyes became dull and lifeless. When he lifted his head and looked at Su Ming, a crazed sneer appeared on his lips. This was an expression formed due to his grudge, his unwillingness to accept his face, and everything else before he died. Perhaps this could not be called a sneer. It was an expression that had no name, an expression that was not of crying or smiling. The god of Berserker's fate was to suffer being quartered. His body would be torn to pieces, and he would seal the land of the Berserkers for generations to come. This is the will of Morning Dao, Sima Xin mumbled. This string of words had emerged in his head the instant he touched the hand all those years ago. This was the power that sealed the second god of Berserkers. This power did not belong to Sima Xin, but belonged to the world in the depths of the sea where he and Su Ming stood right at that moment, because this was the place where the second's left hand was sealed, and this sealing power had originally existed in this place to begin with. Sima Xin was simply activating the seal, making the seal spread out to seal all the people who had any sort of connection to the second god of Berserkers. Almost the moment he said these words, the sea stopped moving. The sea surging down from above also stopped moving as if time had stopped for them. The god of Berserkers' left hand trembled, and yellow waves of light shot out from it. The worlds located in the 5 directions suppress the Berserker's arm. Once these 5 directions shift, the universe will close its eyes, and Yin Death will open. Sima Xin laughed loudly. At that moment, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. Just as he was about to close in on Sima Xin, the man closed his eyes and continued laughing. I lost, but I didn't lose to you, Su Ming. I lost to fate. God, if you already had me in the world, then why did you make Su Ming appear? Could this be my destiny? Am I fated to fight against Su Ming, and the only one alive will be the one truly chosen by heaven? Sima Xin laughed maniacally. Tears fell from his eyes. His left hand swiftly exploded, while his left leg rotted away into liquid. From the moment he obtained the second god of Berserker's inheritance up to this point, from his initial delight up to his current despair, Sima Xin had gone through too many things. As he looked at Su Ming, his hatred had grown to an indescribable level. Even if he had to die, he would drag Su Ming down with him. If this is my destiny, then I will fight against it. Neither of us will survive. I want him to die with me. I want this destiny to not be fulfilled against me. The instant he said these words, his body shattered, turning into a large amount of black flesh pieces that fell onto the surface of the sea. Sima Xin, who was the prodigy of Freezing Sky Clan, who had obtained the second god of Berserker's inheritance, and who had called himself the fourth god of Berserkers, ended his life right before Su Ming in the place he obtained his inheritance and in the place that was the source of his great power. As his body was torn apart, no more life force went towards him. Perhaps his life had been determined since the moment he met Su Ming in Han Mountain City. If he did not die, then Su Ming would. At the instant Sima Xin died, a ray of red light flew out from his shattered body. That red light was a wooden red puppet. It was built in Sima Xin's image, but there was a dried drop of blood at the center of its forehead, and right under that drop of blood was a white strand of hair. It was very short and incredibly soft. It did not look as if it belonged to an adult, but looked like the fetal hair of a baby. However, it was white. There was no sign of life on that strand of hair, only a thick wave of aura of death that Su Ming was incredibly familiar with. But he was even more familiar with the strand of hair and the dried drop of blood. He might never have seen them before, but the familiar sensation from them gave him a feeling that they belonged to him. At that moment, cracks appeared on the puppet's body. With a bang, it broke down into smithereens. Right then, the white strand of hair got dyed in blood and floated to the air. Su Ming did not know whether it was a mere coincidence, but the strand drifted towards him and landed on his palm. When it touched his palm, he shuddered. Then, something akin to a storm stirred in his eyes. It was as if his mind was dragged out by the strand of hair and he entered a strange world. Su Ming could only feel booming sounds going off in his head. He saw himself rushing out of the depths of the sea towards the sky. The clouds in the sky churned, and with an extreme speed, he charged towards a protective screen of light surrounding this place, right to the boundless sky. When he arrived at the end of the sky and shot through the dark clouds that covered the sun, a bright clear sky appeared. He did not stop. It was as if there was a string tied securely around him, guiding him to continue rising into the sky. He did not know how much time passed. When the bright clear sky was no longer around, black fog surrounded him. He was familiar with it. It was the fog from Yin Death region, the fog that had surrounded the ancient bronze sword in the past and stopped it from traveling out. Su Ming rose up through the fog in a daze until he heard a roaring. A beast lay within the fog before him. It had the head of an alligator, but the body of a dragon that stretched to an unknown distance. That beast was looking around with its head stretched outwards, as if hesitating about something. A powerful presence that almost made Su Ming's mind break down spread from the creature's body, but the beast clearly did not see him. Su Ming could feel himself shooting through the black fog as he continued rising into the air. On the way, he saw more than a dozen powerful and strange ferocious beasts. In fact, the ones he saw near the end gave him a feeling that they were even stronger than Di Qian's clone. The fog above him gradually became thinner. As faint and indistinct roars echoed in the air, he shot out of the darkness, and he saw the galaxy, the stars, and everything else that he had seen on the ancient bronze sword in the past. Su Ming also saw the vortex formed by the black fog beneath him. It was gigantic and covered an incredibly wide area within the endless galaxy. The vortex rotated with loud rumbling sounds, and as the fog surrounded it, the aura of death filled the entire area. Su Ming's body continued rising even as he looked at the galaxy and the stars. Unable to control himself, he arrived on a large piece of land floating in this galaxy, located somewhere away from the vortex. This was a desolate piece of land. There were signs of life here, the only structure a towering altar. On it was a person, and he was lying there quietly. His limbs were impaled to the ground, and his dried blood filled the entire area. There was a drop of blood at the center of the person's brows, and on it was a white strand of hair. This person seemed like a young adult, but, the instant Su Ming saw his appearance, a bang went off in his head. This was Sima Xin. As Su Ming trembled, he whipped his head around, and then, he saw similar altars suddenly appearing on the originally desolate piece of land. Those altars were so numerous that they covered the entire area. By the looks of it, there were hundreds of them. Moreover, the sizes of these altars varied. There were 5 altars that were incredibly tall and their sizes far surpassed those of others. When Su Ming saw them, he had a sudden urge to look so that he could see whether there were corpses similar to this lying around. Yet right at the instant he wanted to go forth and look, a strong suction force appeared around his body and dragged him backwards at an extreme speed. Within an instant, brought Su Ming back to the vortex in Yin Death region. Su Ming's eyes sparkled. Just as he was about to cast a divine ability so that he could force his body to stay in this place, he found out that he did not have a body, only a thread of his spirit. In bitterness, he was forced to retreat while tumbling backwards, but in his eyes was madness as he silently engraved the image in his heart. As he retreated, he saw an endless amount of continents floating in the galaxy. There were altars such as these on each continent, as if they formed a gigantic rune. Right in the middle of that rune was a continent, and on that continent, Su Ming saw vaguely that there was only one huge altar there. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that the continent in the center was in itself an altar. Su Ming might only have managed to catch a brief glance of that place, but he had sensed a calling towards his soul. This was the final thing he saw. When his world cleared up again, he found himself standing at the depths of the sea, and the strand of white hair floated above his palm. It gradually shattered and disappeared without a trace. Su Ming stood there quietly and closed his eyes. At that moment, yellow light was shining from the god of Berserker's left arm beneath him, and as it spread out, a loud bang rumbled in the air. The light grew brighter and illuminated the entire seabed. A huge seal pointing in 5 directions manifested from the second god of Berserker's left hand. It covered the god of Berserker's left hand, as if it was what had sealed the hand for an unknown amount of time. That seal was naturally the 5-direction seal that was suppressing the second god of Berserker's left hand. It was also the treasure that Sai Ma Xin was confident could make Su Ming die with him. There was only one use to this treasure, and that was to suppress and to seal. It was to suppress all those connected to the second god of Berserkers and seal away all of the second god of Berserker's power. However, due to its long existence, the seal's power had been greatly reduced. The mighty strength within the second god of Berserkers had also caused the 5-direction seal to fuse with his left hand. Once they could no longer be separated, the seal's power of suppression was weakened once again. That was why Sai Ma Xin could obtain the inheritance. However, due to Sai Ma Xin's madness, the seal was awakened. The water in the depths of the sea was still. The waves at the seabed did not move. Everything at the bottom of the sea had ceased to move since the moment just now. Besides Sai Ma Xin's crumbling body, the white strand of hair floating above the palm, and Su Ming himself, everything else had been frozen. Su Ming opened his eyes. Chapter 565. Serendipity. The instant Su Ming opened his eyes, the 5-direction seal on the god of Berserker's left hand exuded a gentle yellow light in the still world. That light was like sunlight, causing the still depths of the sea to be illuminated with a golden sheen, turning it to a golden world. Su Ming's body was also illuminated by that light. His appearance had already faded away and he was shining with a gentle golden light. Nothing dangerous could be detected from the light, but it was rather strange in this still world. Because everything that was illuminated within the area of this light would disappear without a single sound, be it the seawater or the ice. It was as if the golden light could devour everything, and as the things around Su Ming disappeared, the golden light looked as if it was slowly shrinking. As it moved back, the edges of the light and the sea seemed to have been separated into 2 different dimensions. A sealing power filled the golden light. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. His body suddenly swayed and he abruptly disappeared from his spot. Almost the instant he vanished, he reappeared in his original spot. His expression turned dark and he frowned. He had warped just now, but he was forced out of space itself right away. The seal in this place had isolated everything. The golden light in the area continued shrinking right before his eyes. The edges of that light were dark. Su Ming took a step forward and turned into a long arc. He lifted his right hand and seized the air. Immediately, the bone blade appeared in it, turning into the tip of the long arc as he charged towards the shrinking golden barrier. A rumbling sound echoed in the air. Su Ming tumbled backwards and he took 8 continuous steps back. His expression turned darker. The sealing power contained within the golden barrier was something he could not pierce through. As the light continued shrinking, Su Ming lifted his head and looked upwards. A grave expression appeared on his face. He could see a faint gold shade beyond the golden light above his head, and it was not just a single layer, there were 5 of them. 5 layers of light that continued becoming darker with each layer, and all of them were gold. This was the 5-direction seal. Each layer of gold represented one direction of the seal's power. Right then, the 5 directions were all present, causing the seal's power to be nothing common. The golden light around Su Ming was continuously shrinking towards the god of Berserker's left hand, forcing him to take a few steps so that he no longer stood at the edge. It was as if his body was trapped in an incessantly shrinking cage and he could only move with the cage as it continued shrinking. Su Ming frowned. Sai Ma Xin might have died, but this sealing power he activated before his death was incredibly strange. Su Ming could not leave no matter what he tried, and judging by the area covered by the golden light, even if he had been able to leave beforehand, he would still have been enveloped within the light, and he would still be eternally sealed in this place. Judging by how crazed Xianxia was, this seal should be the one sealing the second god of Berserker's left hand. Now that I've absorbed the second god of Berserker's soul fragments with the welcoming of deities, it can be said that I've obtained some of his legacy. Because of that, the seal believes I fulfill its requirements to be sealed. Su Ming's eyes flashed. At that moment, the ancient second god of Berserker's left hand was standing erect in this land several dozens of feet away from him. The golden light that was shrinking slowly towards them laid 100 feet away. The area beyond the 5 layers of light was an empty void. It was like a ravine that had separated the area from the seawater. Xianxia believed that I obtained the inheritance, same as he did. But in truth, I absorbed the soul fragments with the welcoming of deities, so it's very simple to leave this place. As long as I make the seal believe I don't have the second god of Berserker's presence on me, then I can leave. A pensive look appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He looked at the golden light and his eyes flickered before he swiftly opened his mouth. Immediately, a dark light flew out and turned into the welcoming of deities before him. The instant it left his body, his presence swiftly weakened by a large margin. All the divine abilities related to the second god of Berserkers also faded away from his memories. His control over his body also reached its peak condition and he was no longer as rusty as before. More importantly, the instant the welcoming of deities left, he no longer sensed the sealing power from the shrinking golden light around him. As I thought. Su Ming's brows did not relax and he continued to frown. A hint of uncertainty appeared on his face. He looked at the second god of Berserker's left hand standing erect beside him, then looked at the golden light from the 5-direction seal, and became uncertain. If I leave now, I won't be exposed to danger most likely. I can go back to surface of the sea without much trouble and return to the 9th summit. But the second god of Berserker's left hand will be sealed up again. Even if I come back and search for it later on, I won't be able to find it. Su Ming's gaze fell on the empty ravine in the darkness standing between the screen of light and the seawater. Clearly, this place had been separated into 2 regions. Leaving this place would be much easier than trying to come in from the world outside. But it's quite unfortunate if I leave just like this. Su Ming continued to frown. He was not really that interested in the second god of Berserker's inheritance, but he had all sorts of feelings welling within him when he thought about Xianxia's great art of heartless Berserker seed. More importantly, he'd seen the second god of Berserker's divine abilities and arts just now. He had even experienced casting one of them himself just moments ago, and those divine abilities were what he was lacking at the moment. And the second god of Berserker's left hand could make Xianxia continuously recover, so there must be a large amount of life force contained within it. 1/8 of all the bones in my body have been turned into Berserker bones now. If I could absorb the second's left hand, then perhaps I could reach a breakthrough again. Once Su Ming thought about that, his heart started racing against his chest. On one hand, he could leave safely, but he would not be able to receive much serendipity. On the other hand, he could stay and face danger to try and absorb the god of Berserker's left hand. It did not matter whether he would fail or succeed, he would have to face the risk of being sealed in for eternity. How should he choose? There was very little time left, and Su Ming absolutely had no time to think too deeply about this. A flicker of light appeared in his eyes and he gritted his teeth. Success only comes if you take risks. There is no serendipity in the world that would arrive without cause. I need to fight to gain and exchange for what I want. I might have received a serendipitous event in the Candle Dragon's undying and imperishable world and obtained the Candle Dragon's blessing, but the premise was that I had fought for it while exposing myself to an incredible risk. The golden light around him was already close to the god of Berserker's left hand before his eyes, and the light screen above him was also sinking, causing the dimension where Su Ming and the god of Berserker's left hand was to become increasingly smaller. The light shining from the 5-direction seal was no longer gentle, but gained a fierce, mighty air, as if it wanted to suppress all things related to the second god of Berserkers so that it could fulfill the mission it received in the past. I'll take the risk. A determined look appeared on Su Ming's face. If he left just like this, he would definitely be filled with discontent. That was why he decided to take the risk. The instant Su Ming made this decision, he lifted his right hand and seized the welcoming of deities, swallowing it once again. The presence around his body instantly changed, and his pupils turned even darker. A faint, illusionary shadow seemed to have appeared in his eyes, and then, he took a step to land right on the second god of Berserker's left hand. This was the first time Su Ming stepped on there, and just like what Sai Ma Xin did previously, he sat down cross-legged. He touched down. It was warm. This was the first thing Su Ming felt when he touched the god of Berserker's left hand. That indefinable warmth made him feel as if they had met somewhere before. The instant he sat down, the light from the 5-direction seal above him swiftly started shining even more brilliantly, moving from a gentle light to a piercing glare. The mighty presence contained within also started growing endlessly at the moment. I don't need your inheritance. I just want your life force and the divine abilities that belong to the god of Berserkers. Su Ming stated slowly. As he closed his eyes, he lifted his hands and pressed them flat on the surface by his sides, right on top of the god of Berserker's left palm. Right away, Su Ming sucked in a deep breath. A vast amount of life force swiftly surged into his body through his hands and body with rumbling sounds echoing in the air. This was the power contained within the second god of Berserker's left hand. This was the power that supported the arm so that it would not be destroyed, and this power was originally something no one else could absorb besides Sai Ma Xin. Due to his level of cultivation, Sai Ma Xin could not absorb too much life force. He had originally intended to absorb this wave of power every single time his level of cultivation rose. Then, when he perfectly completed his cultivation, he would absorb all the power within the god of Berserker's left hand and turn it into something that belonged to him. At that time, he would be able to obtain a portion of the second god of Berserker's strength. Now, with Sai Ma Xin's death, no one else could absorb the power contained within the god of Berserker's left hand. Yet due to the welcoming of deities, Su Ming could indirectly obtain the inheritance, which turned him into a person who could absorb this power. Besides, the amount of life force Su Ming needed for the Berserker bones in his body was simply too much, and it was something Sai Ma Xin could not hope to compare. That was why Su Ming seemed to have turned into a bottomless pit as he absorbed the life force. When he closed his eyes and the life force surged into his body, the second god of Berserker's left hand shuddered, and the fingers that had never moved since ancient times started moving slowly. Eventually, those 5 fingers started slowly closing up to turn into a shield protecting Su Ming's body within the palm. This protection was a vague form of acknowledgement and should have originally been Sai Ma Xin's serendipity, yet now, it had become Su Ming's. If Sai Ma Xin had not died and saw this scene, he would definitely cough up blood, because this should have originally belonged to him. Su Ming lifted his head. His long hair danced in the wind, and he looked at the golden light closing in until it completely enveloped the god of Berserker's left hand, and the 5-direction seal floated above his head, causing the area around him to be completely sealed. The area was filled with a deadly silence. Only Su Ming could be seen sitting still and unmoving through the cracks formed between the second god of Berserker's left hand when it closed up. Time flowed slowly. At that moment, there was a great number of people gathered on the 9th summit outside this sealed world. All of these people were the survivors from Heaven Gate. At that moment, all of them had complicated expressions on their faces as they occasionally looked towards the sea. Bai Su was also looking at the surface of the sea quietly from a corner, with a rather anxious expression on her face. As Hu Zi continued snoring in his cave abode, the bald crane stepped on Hu Zi's back and pecked his back with its sharp beak. A thin thread was plucked out and swallowed with a snap of the crane's jaws. An incredibly contented look appeared on its face. Weren't you just playing hide and seek with me earlier? Go on, hide. Once you hide properly, I will find you, and I will eat you.